Sandhya, a Digi Saver, and I will guide you through the Digital India program. In this module, we shall discuss about the role of digital technology in everyday life, understanding what Digital India program is, what are the vision areas of Digital India and its 9 pillars. Remember the days when we had to pen down letters and walked to the nearest post box to drop them? And now, the evolution over the years has enabled us to send messages and letters in less than a second. Let's go back to older times where we had rotary dialer phones. These phones were replaced by mobile phones. Our everyday lives have never been so easy. All thanks to the digital technology which helps in making calls, chatting, sending emails, looking up for information within seconds. Let us now see how people are using digital technology in their day-to-day life. Preeti uses the internet to interact with her friends and to take online lessons. She uses an UPI Pay app on her phone to buy movie tickets, order food, book a cab, and recharge her metro card. For her, life is fun. Mrs. and Mr. Joseph narrated how easy it was to get a pension certificate from Jeevan Praman. For them, life is easier since they can book a doctor's appointment and buy grocery online. Mrs. Geeta said she was fairly surprised when internet worked wonders for her in getting a PAN card within a week. She explained how easily she got her company registered in a few clicks. She now plans to secure herself a position in government's e-marketplace. Mr. Naidu, an employee at Income Tax Department, shares how digitization has speeded up the taxation processes. He is glad that people can now pay their taxes online, avoiding the long hours of queue and processing a file. Citizens of India are utilizing digital technology to improve the quality of life at work and personally. It is amazing. But this is a small segment of the country. Studies reveal that out of 1.2 billion population, only
A very good afternoon to everyone. And we are back with a new webinar, which is on preparation and filing of GST Trans 1. We have with us our speaker of the day, Mr. Sashi Bhushan Singh, sir. He is a Vice President Service at GSTN and has already taken few of the webinars, which have been taken well by the participants and appreciated a lot. Before we move on to the webinar part, just few housekeeping rules. If we have any questions, let's refrain from asking it in chat box and put them in the question and answer section. It allows us to answer them in an effective manner and allowing us to answer them back even if the session has been closed. For the presentations and the videos of the webinar, the current one and all the past webinars, we can always go to kms.nhd.in. All our presentations and webinars are available there in PDF and video format. If any of your friend is facing issue in joining this webinar as of now, because we have a full house even before we started, you can always go to our YouTube channel, Digital India Learning, and watch this webinar live over there. Now, without any further ado, welcome Mr. Sashi Bhushan Singh, sir, and hand over the mic to him.
Thanks, Prabhakar, and a very warm afternoon. Good afternoon to all the participants to this session on Trans 1. Basically, how you prepare and file Trans 1, which all the taxpayers are already doing, but we will again explain what are the nuances of this software and how they can file it in a better manner. I would also like to thank NEGD for facilitating this interaction with the taxpayers, which we hope are useful both for the taxpayers and for us also to understand the perspectives of the taxpayers. Now, transfers, we already know that transition one, this application is live since last 21st of August. And TRAN 1 is a form which enables people to take credit from the existing laws, that is the earlier central excise and service tax laws. Now the structure of this session will be that first I will take you quickly through an overview of the TRAN 1 form, then on the information that has to be furnished in TRAN 1, and there will be what is the modes of signing and common errors that people are encountering while filing this TRAN 1 form, which we have become aware of. I would like to address them, and then there will be a brief demo on this online preparation and filing of TRAN 1, and then a session of question answers. Now, TRAN 1 is a form which all registered taxpayers are required to file if they have to take credit from the earlier regime. And there are certain provisions of the transition regarding principal agent, regarding job work goods lying with the job workers. And if such situations are there and people are trying to take benefit of those provisions, then also they have to make those declarations in TRAN 1. This form has to be filed within 90 days of the appointed date, though there is a provision that Commissioner can extend the due date by 90 days on recommendation of the GST Council. This form was launched on 21st August. I think all of us would appreciate that this gigantic exercise that all of us are participating in, that is GST transition, involved a lot of exercise on finalizing the transition rules. So the law committee, in trying to be very comprehensive and yet simple, they took a lot of time to finalize these provisions, and they got finalized only by the end of June. And hence the application development got delayed and it could only be launched by August. But still now it is launched, and we will discuss the features of this application. Now you can claim credit on the basis of this TRAN 1 form when you submit and file transition. And this credit gets post-credited to your ITC ledger. Presently, the present laws don't specify that it can be revised, but taking cognizance of the demand of the taxpayers, the council is deliberating on the fact of coming up with the enabling provision to revise it. But it may come soon, but it's still not there. Now, whatever credits that get credited to the ITC ledger when you submit and file TRAN 1, they can be used for paying the liabilities of GSTR 3B and GSTR 3. Next, कैसे जाएगा? ठीक. Now, TRAN 1 form, both the notified form and here also in this application also, there are 8 sections. And in each section, there are few tables. There are, in some cases, there are separate tables for both center and state because the provisions are different and the taxes are different. So altogether, there are 16 tables, and each in the application, you will see that they are represented by different tabs and then tiles. Now the application is such that when you fill a data in one particular table, there is a save button at the bottom. You have to save the data in that table, and then the data gets processed, and if it is processed with error, you will find a error message. Otherwise, the data gets saved, and then when you submit and file, the credit, the input tax credit, gets posted to the ITC ledger. Now, the first table in this transition, that form, is the table in which you claim credit, which is there in your last filed return of both center and state. For the center, you have 5A table, and whatever admissible credit that is there in the last return, and it is admissible as CGST credit, central credit also, or state credit also, that you have to declare in the tables in this section. In 5A, you declare the central credit that is admissible as ITC in accordance with transitional provision, and then in 5C, you have the VAT credit that is there in the last filed return. Since, I mean, you all know that this GST regime, in the GST regime, each taxpayer is expected to have one registration in one state, and only in certain exceptional circumstances, multiple registration is allowed. So if you had multiple registration in the earlier regime, you are required to take credit of all the returns, that is, take credit that is being carried forward in all the returns of the units located in that state. In case of both center and state, in case of center, if the person was having a central excise registration also and a service tax also in a particular state, then he can take credit of both the registrations in 5A. And the fields are, you are aware of these fields. In case of state, there is one critical issue, that one has to declare the pending C forms, the turnover of the forms that is pending, and the tax that is applicable, and that is payable on them, the differential tax, because they would have paid a tax at a concessional rate. Similar for F form and H form. So they have to declare the tax that is pending on such forms, and pendency is from the April to this June, April 2015 to June 2017. Is it okay? It's communicating? Okay. So there is one more column, and there's column 7 in this table, that is ITC reversal relatable to C form or F form. Say in the earlier VAT laws, there were provision that if the person was transferring goods on F form, then he was required to reverse the ITC that was related to that transaction at the rate of central tax, that is 4 or 2%, depending on the different states at different tax rates. So that has to be declared in column number 7, and that it gets added to your balance, and the other C form, F form, H form, the differences tax payable are subtracted, and then the last column shows the maximum ITC that is allowable. Now, of that, what is admissible, you will take. Well, you should remember that there can never be a negative in the credit in the last carry forward. So initially, I mean, our application was throwing a negative, but now it has been corrected. It should have always been 0. The taxpayers in normal course were required to make it 0, but people didn't make 0, and in some cases, a negative entry has got posted, which efforts are being made to correct. Now, another requirement of this table is that one has to give C form and F form and H form that have been actually furnished by the taxpayer over the period from 1st April 2015 to 30th June 2017. We are providing an offline utility. You will just see it during the demo. But this offline utility is only for this 5B. We are also planning to provide utility for 6A, 6 and 7 sections, which will be made available on the portal very soon. In case of Form C and F, as I said, if the difference tax payable is higher than the balance of ITC that is being taken forward, that is being carried forward, normally a taxpayer is not expected to furnish, but if he furnishes here, since no credit will be taken forward, if he furnishes here, the credit that will be taken forward, if the amount of difference tax payable is higher on account of C, F or H form, will be 0. Whatever tax liability that may be imposed on the taxpayer will be imposed under the existing laws. Here only under CG, and though they may be recovered under, they can be recovered under GST laws, but they will not be declared here. In TRAN 1, the credit that will be carried forward will be zero if the difference tax payable on C form, F form, H form is more than the balance of ITC that is being carried forward of VAT. Now, next table is six table. In this section, the taxpayer will, through these two tables, 6A and 6B, the taxpayer will be carrying forward the credit that he has not availed on the capital goods that are lying with the taxpayer. In most cases, the manufacturer will be having huge credits. Under earlier laws, the credit on capital goods could be taken in installments, and that's why there were many cases where there was pending installments of unavailed credit, and if these credits were eligible under the CGST or SGST laws, they could be taken through Form 6A and 6B. These two forms are there. 6A is for central credit and 6B is for state credit. Now, seventh table, the section 7 is with respect to the tax that has been paid under earlier law on the stock that the taxpayer has on the appointed, just before the appointed day, on the day preceding the appointed day. Now, the table is there because when GST is being implemented, there are certain class of taxpayers which were not paying tax on these stock under the earlier regime, but are now required to pay tax. So to avoid cascading, this benefit is being given so that they can take credit and pay tax only on the value addition. Now, there are several scenarios in which this will arise. One is that the taxpayer was not required to register because the threshold limit under earlier law, especially under central excise, was very high, but now it has been brought down to 20 lakhs. So they will be registering, and if they have evidence of duty paying stock, they will declare in part 7A of 7A. And if they don't have any evidence of duty payment, but they have a stock and they have an invoice which supporting that stock, then they have to declare in the part 7B. This table will always also be required to be filled if certain commodities which were not taxable earlier, but the taxpayer has inputs or capital goods or semi-finished goods on which tax has been paid, and now that stock has become taxable in the GST regime. Now 7B is, see, this 7A is for central, for a stock that you have on the day preceding the appointed day, and 7C is for state taxes. And 7C is when you have invoice in which tax was paid, and then 7D when you had invoice in which the tax payment was not there, especially in case of in states where single point taxation was there on some commodities. They are required to fill this table 7D. Now, apart from the stock, the credit is also allowable to be taken in GST regime if the tax was paid under earlier laws, but the goods have been received after the appointed date and entered into the books within 30 days, but this date can be extended by another 30 days by the commissioner. So if these are entered within the stipulated time period, the tax that has been paid earlier, and if it is eligible for credit in the existing regime, the one can take credit by declaring in table 7B. Now here there are two columns. One is eligible duties and taxes, which refer to the taxes paid under the earlier law, and the other is VAT, which refers to the tax paid under the VAT law. Now, table 8 is with respect to a few taxpayers who were having centralized registration under earlier law, but are now required to have a registration, statewide registration. So they can take credit in their centralized registered entity and then transfer credit to the different GST that got registered under the GST regime in different states having same PAN. They are required to indicate their distribution in this table, the credit will then get transferred to the different units. Now, table 9A is for the job worker, for the manufacturer and job worker, because the transition law provides that if goods are returned within six months from the appointed date, the job there will be no tax liability. So both declaration is being taken both from the principal and job worker of the goods that are lying with the job worker, if they are registered or if they are not registered. Both job worker and declaration has to be filed by the registered manufacturer and the registered job worker of the goods that they have with respect to the manufacturer or job worker. Now, table 10 is, in some states they have they had this that agent were not required to pay tax and the principal was required to pay tax, but under GST both the agent now and principal are liable to pay tax. So declaration is being taken from the principal and the agent of the stock that is lying with the agent, and the input tax that is related that has to be taken as credit by the agent. Now, if both these declaration has to be same, but we are presently posting the entry, posting the credit on the basis of declaration made by the agents. Later on, if after say all the trans one are filed, if there is any discrepancy, proceedings will be initiated under section 73-74 of the present act. Now there is another provision 142(11)(c) for which there is a table in TRAN 1. This provision is stated that the early that if there were certain goods or services on which tax was leviable under both service tax and VAT laws under the earlier regime, then if the supplies were taking place during the GST regime, these transactions were taxable under GST laws, and the tax that had been paid under the earlier laws was available as credit. Stop share आ गया हाँ? ठीक है, तो this for this table 11 is there that one has to take credit of the tax paid under the earlier law. In certain transactions both taxes would have been paid. In some transactions like say advance on hotel booking or reservations, since tax was leviable only on advance under earlier law in service tax, not in VAT, so only service tax would have been paid and the credit would be taken if the supply of goods and services is taking place in GST. हो गया और कौन है लास्ट कैसे होगा स्टॉप शेयर हो गया हाँ तो ये नेक्स्ट कैसे है जा नहीं रहा है there is another table which refers to in which a person has the taxpayer who have sent goods on approval basis. During the past 6 months, they have to declare, because if these goods are not returned within 6 months, then both the person who has sent the goods and will have to pay tax, and the person who has received goods, if he is rejecting and sending back the goods, then they will have to pay tax. So this declaration is being taken. This declaration is there in a few VAT acts, not in the Center Act. Now there are a few questions which I think I can address, which have come. Is that does every table in TRAN 1 needs to be filled? See, a taxpayer is required only to fill the relevant tables and submit. All tables which are not the tables which are not related to him need not be filled. As I said, in case of capital goods, taxes paid on capital goods, VAT tax paid on capital goods, which was not availed as credit under earlier law, but which is now eligible under CGST, they have to declare that under table 6B. Now, how one can file? So this TRAN 1 form, there are three There are basically two ways in which you can file. The main way that is available now is online entry on the portal. Though few days back, we have provided a CSV offline tool for table 5B. Now the offline tool for table 6 and 7 are also being made, and they will be available soon on the portal. Now, some of the errors which we have and seen that people are having is that they, they have to fill all the mandatory fields and the valid dates. If the dates are not valid, system is rejecting, because there is a date validation in case of all the date fields. Most case, the date of the invoice has to be before the appointed date and within 1 year, and all those validations are there. One main error that people are facing, and I will also demonstrate during the demo also, is that many invoices, people are getting a message processed with error, though the whole line item is showing that it has been processed, but the last column shows that it is processed with error. In most cases, this is happening because the registration number against which that invoice is being declared, or that line item is being declared, does not exist in the registration or enrollment application of the taxpayer. Now, taxpayer is required to use the non-core amendment facility, add such registration numbers in them, and then fill the TRAN form with those same registration numbers, and those numbers should be exactly similar to what was filed in the application. There should not be any blank spaces, otherwise the system may throw an error. That was a briefly overview. Now I will a few more questions which are here before me, I will address them. And one is that revision. I tell you whether revision of form TRAN 1 is available or not. See, the present laws don't permit revision, but this demand is pending with the GST Council, and everyone hopes that soon this facility will be available to the taxpayer, because many taxpayers have made error while filing the transition form. फिर अब क्या है, now we will have a demo, huh? अच्छा, there is another question is कि first stage dealer. See, what first stage dealer doesn't avail any credit, they only transfer credit, so they are not required, they will not be having, they don't pay tax under the central excise laws. They only transfer credit, so they will not be filling any details in 5A, but they can 5 में भरेंगे. But this if the taxpayer has invoices which are from first stage, second stage, or any dealer, traders will be basically, all the traders will have to fill form 7A, form which you call 7A, in which they will be taking credit on the stock that will be available with them, on which evidence evidence of excise duty is there, and they are now required to pay tax in the GST regime if they get registered under GST separately. फिर कहाँ आएंगे? ठीक है, 7A 7D, ओके. तो अब इसको करें वो. हाँ. Now we will have a demo. वेबसाइट डालना पड़ेगा. खुला नहीं. क्रोम So I'm giving this demo from our testing site, but it is similar to what is there on the GST site. So what you can see that when you log in, you get this page. When you go to the site, you get this page, and this is the login page where you have to enter your login ID and password. 24. Returns 24. 1, 2, 3, na? 8, 9, 4, 6, 7. Now it is logging in. When you correctly enter your password and user ID, then you are able to log in after entering the CAPTCHA code. From the services tab, you have to go to the returns tab and then to the transition form. Say when you go to the transition form link, you see by default the TRAN1 form, this page is open, but there are other links also, TRAN2, TRAN3. TRAN3 is already there, and but TRAN2 is going to come very soon. You see in TRAN1, your GST legal name, all these things will be displayed on the top, and then the first declaration that is being taken is whether you have filed all the returns under existing law for the period of 6 months. Now this is required because if you have not filed, you're not eligible for taking credit, and you cannot take forward the credit that is there in the last return. So the moment you do no here, you can see the two tiles, both the centralized registration, the credit that you can take forward from the centralized registration and distribute, and the credit that you can take forward from the last return. Both are not visible now, but when you do yes, these two tabs are also visible. Now in the first we see this is the table for taking credit for carrying the credit forward from the earlier regime. Once you press add detail, now the central tax tab is pressed by default. If you click on add detail, the form opens for the central tax. Now here you have to fill the registration of the earlier regime regarding whose return the credit is being carried forward. In the last return of that registration number, you had excess credit, which can be carried forward to the present regime also, whether it is admissible as credit in the GST regime also. There you have to first declare the registration number. If suppose you declare any register number which is not there, I am putting any absurd number, and we will soon see what is the implication of this. The last return which you had filed was June. Maybe the date for filing was 15th of August. Now the credit that was there in the last return was 58,000, and the credit that is eligible, maybe let us say it is 50,000. Now if you save here, you will find that the system is presently processing. It is saying in progress. After some times it will give you a response. कहाँ से रिफ्रेश हुआ? F5. नहीं, रिफ्रेश नहीं है. हाँ, ये नहीं यहाँ नहीं है. अच्छा, there is a refresh button. If you refresh it, I think all the taxpayers should keep in mind this thing, that in all the applications that we have, whether return GSTR1, TRAN1, there is a blue double arrow window on the top band, which you can see, small square area in which there is a white double arrow. This you need to refresh after you have saved, so that the status gets updated on your screen. So this all the taxpayers should keep in mind. This is a feature of our application. Maybe this feature is there because we are using the latest technologies, the distributed computing and processing feature that we are making use of. So, and the asynchronous processing is taking place. So you have to do this refresh. So when I refresh, you find that the status is saying processed with error. Now this error has happened because I have put an absurd registration number. Now, if this registration number is not there under earlier law in your registration file, registration application, then always this error will arise. And the taxpayer should keep in mind that this processed with error, if there is a line item that is processed with error, it means that it has not been saved in the application. So the credit will not be available for this line item. So if you later on submit, you won't find any credit posted. Many people have made mistake in respect of this such entries, that they are assuming that even if it is processed with error, the credit should have been posted because they are seeing it on their screen. And they have not checked whether the registration number that they are entering in this registration field here in the TRAN 1 form, that registration number, whether that registration number exists in their application form or enrollment form of a registration application or enrollment form. You can add another line here. See, here you can see I have added another line, and similarly you can add lines. Okay. So you can add multiple lines like this if you have multiple registrations in the state for which credit has to be taken forward in the GST regime. Now next table that is there is 6A 6B. In 6A 6B, this is UAT environment. That's why you are finding this CSV upload facility, but still it is not functional in the your GST site, but the software has been developed and it is being tested. So here also you have to declare the invoice number and document number. In case of import, it will be bill of entry number and invoice date or document date. So if you fill some number 234 here, date will be before the appointed date, last year. And supplier registration number if it is from a supplier. Say presently it is showing as a mandatory. So if it is a bill of entry, you have to write NA and the system will accept it. And if it otherwise, you have to write the registration number. But the system is not validating this registration number. This is your declaration which the system will accept as it is. Here you have to declare the recipient registration number, means the unit to which this capital good was supplied. That the registration number of that unit has to be furnished here. Similarly, the value and duty and taxes paid under the earlier regime has to be indicated here, and the total credit that was taken under earlier laws that was eligible for Senvet credit under earlier laws, and total Senvet credit that was availed because the credit was allowable in installments. So only part credit would have been availed under earlier law, and the rest has to be declared here. So if you take some registration, I'm again not taking any valid registration, 60,000, 6 lakhs, tax 50,000, sad 10,000. And 60, you had taken 30,000 earlier. So you have 3,000, 30,000 if you had taken earlier, then the system automatically computes how much credit is allowable, that you can maximum credit that is allowable under this GST regime. That is 30,000. Now you have to decide, you can edit it if you feel that the type of activities you are doing, or the keeping in mind the present provisions of law, only 20,000 is eligible, then you will modify it to 20,000. And then you can save it here. Since I mean this was a demand from the industry that there were the number of invoices that they had to upload was huge, so a CSV upload facility is being created and it will be available soon. Similarly, you can declare credit, unavailed credit on capital goods under of VAT, unavailed VAT credit on capital goods. You can take that forward in the to our GST regime as a state tax by declaring the relevant details in this field. Next is I will go next table that is there, which most of the taxpayers, many taxpayers would be interested in declaring their stock and claiming credit, is this 7th section. It has 4 tables. The first table relates to the credit that is available, the SENVAT credit that is available on a stock that is with the taxpayer, which he had not availed under the earlier regime, but wants to avail now because the stock is now taxable under the present regime. This has to be declared HSN wise. You have to first declare the HSN, then you have to declare the unit. There is a restriction that you can declare only alphabets here, and that to only 3 alphabets. Then the quantity has to be declared here, the value, and the eligible duties. In the if you see in the CGST law, there is a list of eligible duties which can be claimed, and the same eligible duties, if those have been paid in respect of those stocks, those will be claimed here. Now there is this tab tells you that if the taxpayer is having invoices on which the evidence of duty payment is there, then he will click here yes and fill the details of the tax here also. But if the stock that he has no evidence of duty payment, then he will fill no here, and this field gets disabled because now there is no evidence of duty payment which can be claimed as credit. The other provision will apply, that he can claim 40 or 60% when he sells in TRAN, sells and pays tax in the return either through GSTR 3B or 3, and files trans 2. So he will claim credit when he files trans 2, but he has to make the declaration of the stock he's having on the day preceding the appointed day in this table 7A. Now 7C table is similar table is there for the stock of for taking credit of VAT or anti-tax paid on a stock on the appointed day, which for in respect of which credit was not allowable under the earlier regime, but is those goods are taxable in the GST regime and you can take credit. So, since most of the states were not had not implemented the HSN scheme, so here only serial number and description is being taken. Here, you will have to mention the description of the goods, their unit, quantity, value, and the VAT paid. I think here one thing needs to be mentioned is that this credit that is allowable is only of VAT and not CST. Whatever CST payment, if any, is mentioned on the bill is not allowable as credit in GST regime, because only VAT paid has to be mentioned here, or entry tax paid, depending upon the provisions of the VAT law in that state. You have to declare whether it is semi-finished, finished, or in which state that stock is there, and how much input tax credit could have been claimed was allowable under the earlier law, and how much is admissible as SGST or UTGST credit. So this table is there. Now 7D table is only applicable in a few cases where in which some states people there were certain commodities which were subject to single point taxation. So the taxpayers down the chain, supply chain, would not have the duty paying VAT paid invoices. So they had to declare they are required to declare this description, unit, quantity, value, and subsequently take a credit of state tax through TRAN 2. Now, another very important provision of this transition is that for those goods and services on which tax was paid under the earlier law, but they were received after the appointed date. So the credit on such taxes are allowable under GST regime, and for claiming that credit, this table 7B is there. In this 7B table, you have to declare these different fields, registration number of the supplier and input service distributor. Now through a notification, this input service distributor has been added. So this credit is available to both the supplier and the if you have invoice of both the supplier or the ISD, you can take credit. Invoice number has to be entered here, invoice date, description, quantity, UQC, value. And there are two columns here. One is for eligible duties and taxes, that is central tax, whatever central tax that has been paid on those goods which have been received after the appointed day, but which were invoiced prior to the appointed, which were supplied prior to the appointed date, or tax was paid prior to the appointed date. Both VAT and CST eligible duties will be declared in these two boxes, and then you have to declare also the date on which these goods have been or services have been received by you. Now the law says that it has to be within 30 days, which can be extended by another 30 days by the commissioner, but presently no extension is there, so it is 30 days. In these tables also, you should take care that this registration number of the supplier and input service distributor is should be a correct one, but it is not being validated here because it is basically your stock. It is other parties' registration. So that was about these 7 tables. These will be the most frequently used tables, 6A, 6, 7A. The questions which generally people have is are people want offline utility for 6 and 7. We are already developing it, and these will be made available soon. Now table 8 is for those who are having centralized registration under service tax in the present regime, in the earlier regime, and now have to take state-wise registration and want to transfer credit claim from this centralized registration to the different units. That can be declared here in this table. You have to mention the ITC that you want to distribute to the different GSTs. You have to mention the different GSTs and add each GST as a different line item also mention the document through which you are distributing. इसके बाद जो है फिर इसमें care should be taken while filling this form that those GSTs should be there, otherwise which are registered, only those should be mentioned. For 9A, 9B, these are credit doesn't flow from these these two tables, but this declaration has to be taken so that tax is not liable when goods are returned from the job worker. This details of goods sent to job worker, both principal and the agent has to declare. The principal has to declare the GST of the job worker if available. He has to make different line items for different job worker, and the goods, and he has to declare goods challan wise which are available with the job worker. And the job worker has to declare the goods, the manufacturer wise, that is principal wise, that goods that he is having. Next table is for a declaration that has to be made by both the principal and agent. This is applicable under certain state GST laws, and they can claim credit of the tax. The agent can claim credit of the tax that has been paid by the principal on the stock that he's having of the principal. Both the agent and the principal have to declare, and both description, unit, quantity, value, and the input tax that has to be taken, that has been paid on these inputs and which can be claimed as a credit. फिर उसके बाद लास्ट टेबल है आपको this there's more tables. There's one table of for credit availed under section 142(11)(c). Here I think this is with respect to 142(11)(c), that on those transactions on which both service tax and VAT was applicable, and the tax had been paid earlier, but the supply takes place in the GST regime. So these have been made taxable under GST regime, and the tax which was paid earlier, those taxes are available as credit, which the taxpayer has to declare in these two: service tax paid as central tax credit, which is available as central tax credit, and VAT tax paid, which are available as state tax credit. In this column, both the total of the service tax and the VAT tax that he would have paid under the earlier regime needs to be declared. Now, in this case also, this will be registration number of the VAT and service tax registration number of the supplier registration number under which here the goods have been, the tax would have been paid under the earlier law. So these two should be there in the taxpayers registration details furnished on GST and for during enrollment and or registration if it is a new registration. The last table is regarding, in some states there is a provision that if the goods have been sent on approval, then tax would be paid when they are actually approved. So in this case, in this table, taxpayer has to furnish the details of the goods that he has sent during the last 6 months on approval to the other parties. If these goods are not received within 6 months, he will be liable to pay tax. But if it is received within 6 months, no tax is payable. And similarly, the person who is returning after 6 months, he will have to pay tax. That was a brief demo of the application. As I said earlier, one has to be very cautious in filling the form, and the form, especially the registration numbers that you declare, should be valid and should be there in your registration database. Then only you will be able to claim credit. Any other questions? क्या हैं कुछ हैं questions? I have started. There is one how. अच्छा. Errors, as I have said, कि presently there is no provision, but it's likely to come. Let us wait. When it comes, you will be able to file a revision of this transition. One thing you should remember that once you submit this transform, everything gets frozen. So if you are not sure, you should first check that all the details have been furnished. Then only you should submit this form. Otherwise, you will end up with the incorrect entries getting frozen. Or क्या questions? There is one question that in 7A and 7D, all the stocks in whatever form you are having on which credit was not allowable under the earlier regime, but the stock is now taxable under the GST regime. Thus, even if the stock is in finished, semi-finished, or raw material form, credit can be claimed by entering in 7A. In 7B, as I said, 7B is in respect of inputs and input services. In the case of 7B, if you have any raw material that was supplied under the earlier regime, but you have received after the appointed date, then you can claim credit in 7B, but this credit is restricted to only inputs and input services. फिर और इनके Now there is one question that earlier I bought plywood paying at 14% VAT. Now I'm selling at 28% GST. How do I recover the difference? See, this transition provision is only for those cases where you for claiming credit of the tax that you had paid in the earlier regime. In case of tax differential, no, this transition provision is not applicable. Say if the tax rate was lower in the earlier regime, is now higher, you have to collect that extra tax from the taxpayer, but that should be limited to the extra amount that you are required to pay to the government after adjusting the credit that is eligible to you through the transition provisions. फिर है आपका another question. As I said, there is one question on whether stock purchase by paying CST input ITC will be available. As the forms are very clear and the provisions are very clear, the input credit that is available is only of VAT and entry tax. So the whatever you have paid as CST is not available as credit in GST regime. Now there's one question that if some of the C form pending to be received, you had applied for the form but you have not received. Say in trans 1, you have to declare the status as on the appointed day, how many forms were pending, because you are taking credit that is given as carried forward in that last return. So you have to declare the liability, differential liability in all the pending forms of the last 2 years and a quarter month. There is one question, how to adjust credit now for invoice raised in 2017. As I said earlier, that if the goods were supplied during the June, that is before the appointed day, and you received the goods after the appointed day, you can claim the credit if it is eligible under GST regime through table 7B. Another question, how can one rectify the errors in trans 1 file? So as I said, presently, once you have submitted, the trans 1 is frozen. Presently, there is no provision of rectification, but the GST Council is seized of this demand of the taxpayers, and it is very likely that the taxpayers would get a chance to revise their trans 1 at least once. There is an anonymous attendee who has asked one question, that when I am entering my service tax registration along with last return filing date, the amount of ITC to be, it is showing service tax registration not valid. As I said earlier, that you have to, this error message means that the registration number is not there in your registration database. So you're required to first enter this registration number using the non-core amendment facility available on the GST portal, and include this service tax registration in your registration details. And then you need to file it with the valid electronic signature. And after it is successfully filed, then you can declare this service tax registration number in your trans 1 form and claim credit against that service tax registration number. See, as I said, digital, as you know, there is one question: is digital signature of the business owner of any chartered accountant required for filing any return of GST? See, the law is clear that only the DSC of the person who is registered or his authorized signatory, only these two persons are required to apply their DSC, and only they will be able to sign on the filed return or transition form. Chartered accountant cannot sign the return that has been filed. He can prepare the return, but the signing has to be done by the taxpayer or his authorized signatory. The many questions that STC number is coming wrong. I mean, as I said, in all cases, people should check what is the STC number that they have furnished in their registration details. And when they furnish a registration number here, it should be exactly similar. Even one, say, space or character, any character is extra character will throw a mismatch error. So care should be taken to fill these registration numbers. There's another question here, that where should we disclose the invoices covered under section 145, that is input services received after appointed date, which were paid under service tax regime as an advance? I mean, for this you have the table 140, table 7B. If tax has been paid under earlier law and the goods are received later, you have to mention those details and take credit and under section in the table 7B. See, all the first stage dealer, second stage dealer who get registered under this GST regime and have evidence of duty paying, have invoices on which duty payment is mentioned of a stock that is there with them, they can claim full credit of the taxes that are mentioned on those invoices by declaring them in table 7A. I think that's all in this session. Thanks a lot for listening, patiently listening. I hope we have clarified some of your doubts so that you will be able to file this transition form and claim your legitimate credits easily. Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Shashi sir. That was a very enriching session for all of us, and I hope most of the queries have been cleared till now. Now, before we sign off, we would definitely like to show how we can find the webinar presentations and the webinar videos on our KMS portal. So I'm going to share my screen. To find the presentation, what you need to do is you need to log into a and you need to open a browser and type in kms.negd.in. Click on the down arrow, type GST, press enter. So you can see all the presentations are available in PDF format, and also the videos are available in the normal video format. If you click on any of the PDF, like we have just opened a PDF trans one, which our speaker for the day, Mr. Sashi sir, has used. The presentation is already here for your reference. You can either download it or you can print it. Once again, thanks to all the users who have joined us on this webinar and also on our YouTube channel. You can keep referring us back on our YouTube channel and subscribe it for all future updates. And we will keep coming back to you with such informative sessions every Wednesday. Thanks and have a very nice day.